When an older man tries to buy attraction instead of inspiring it, he misunderstands the very nature of desire. Attraction has never been transactional at its core. It is emotional, psychological, and deeply intuitive. Younger women, in particular, are extremely sensitive to this distinction. The moment she feels that your value is being presented through money, gifts, or lifestyle displays rather than through who you are, attraction quietly begins to collapse. Here's why. When you lead with resources, you frame the dynamic as an exchange. I provide, you respond. That doesn't create desire, it creates obligation. And obligation is the enemy of genuine attraction. A younger woman doesn't want to feel bought, managed, or subtly pressured into admiration. Even if she accepts the dinner, the gift, or the lifestyle access, something inside her pulls back. Psychologically, she stops experiencing you as a man she's drawn to and starts seeing you as a role she's expected to play along with. This is where many older men get confused. They assume that because they've earned success, stability, and comfort, these things should naturally generate attraction. But success only becomes attractive when it's embodied, not advertised. When money is used as a tool to impress, it signals insecurity. It suggests that without these external props, you fear you wouldn't be enough. Younger women may not articulate this consciously, but they feel it immediately. True masculine attraction doesn't come from what you can give her materially, it comes from how she feels around you emotionally. Does she feel relaxed? Does she feel seen? Does she feel safe yet stimulated? These feelings arise from presence, confidence, calm leadership, and emotional control, not spending power. A man who inspires attraction doesn't need to prove his value. His energy communicates it naturally. There's also a philosophical layer here. Desire wants freedom. When attraction is inspired, a woman feels she is choosing you. When attraction is bought, she feels she is being led by circumstance. Choice creates excitement. Circumstance creates compliance. Younger women crave the emotional thrill of choosing a man who stands firmly in himself, who doesn't negotiate desire, and who doesn't attempt to compensate for age with excess generosity. Another critical point most men miss is this. Money accelerates exposure. When you spend early and heavily, you skip the natural process of curiosity and discovery. Mystery disappears. Tension dissolves. Instead of wondering about you, she starts assessing you. Instead of leaning in emotionally, she leans back mentally. Attraction needs space to grow, and excessive providing collapses that space instantly. This doesn't mean resources are bad. It means timing and intention matter. When your lifestyle is simply noticed rather than presented, it enhances attraction rather than replaces it. When generosity flows naturally later, once mutual interest is established, it feels like expression, not leverage. The most attractive older men understand this intuitively. They don't try to impress younger women. They let women discover them. They don't lead with what they have. They lead with who they are. Their calm, grounded presence says, I don't need to convince you. And paradoxically, that's what makes them irresistible. So the real question isn't how much you can give, it's how much you can withhold without becoming cold. Can you stay centered? Can you let attraction grow organically? Can you trust that your presence alone is enough to spark interest? Because the moment you stop trying to buy desire and start embodying value, attraction stops being something you chase and becomes something you naturally draw in. One of the fastest ways an older man loses attraction with a younger woman is not his age itself, but the way he relates to it. Age is not the liability, insecurity is. The moment a man starts apologizing for his years, joking defensively about being too old, or trying desperately to prove that he's still young, attraction quietly drains away, not because youth is more valuable than age, but because self-doubt is more repelling than time ever could be. Younger women don't fear age. They fear instability, and insecurity about age signals exactly that. When a man seems uncertain about his own timeline, his identity, or his relevance, it triggers a subtle loss of confidence in him as a leader. Attraction is built on certainty. A man who owns his stage of life communicates groundedness, direction, and internal coherence. A man who fights it communicates inner conflict. Psychologically, when an older man over-explains his age, he places it at the center of the interaction. He forces her to evaluate something she may not have been concerned about in the first place. He turns a non-issue into a focal point. And once a woman starts evaluating rather than experiencing, attraction weakens. Desire lives in the body and intuition, not in mental comparison charts. Trying to act young creates the same problem in a different form. When an older man adopts slang that doesn't fit him, chases trends aggressively, or competes with younger men on their terms, he gives up his greatest advantage, depth. Younger women are not drawn to older men who mimic youth, they're drawn to older men who transcend it. Maturity becomes attractive when it's embodied as calm, confidence, and perspective, not when it's hidden behind performance. There's also a philosophical truth here that many men overlook. Every stage of life carries its own authority. A man in his later years has lived consequences, endured losses, and refined his identity. When he rejects his age, he rejects the very experiences that give him weight. Attraction responds to wholeness, not denial. When you stand fully inside your life story without apology, people feel it and respect it. Younger women often test this unconsciously. They watch how you speak about your past, how you relate to your current reality, and whether you seem at peace with where you are. If you speak from resentment, nostalgia, or regret, they sense unresolved tension. If you speak from acceptance and clarity, they sense emotional safety. And emotional safety is one of the strongest drivers of attraction, especially across age gaps. Owning your age also removes pressure from the dynamic. When you're comfortable with yourself, she doesn't feel like she has to reassure you, validate you, or manage your insecurities. She can relax. She can be playful. She can be curious. Attraction flourishes when a woman feels free from the emotional labor of stabilizing a man's self-image. The most compelling: older men never try to convince a younger woman that age doesn't matter. They behave in a way that makes the question irrelevant. Their confidence isn't loud, defensive, or performative. It's quiet, it's settled, it's expressed through decisiveness, boundaries, humor, and self-respect. So instead of asking yourself how to hide your age, ask yourself how to inhabit it. How can you express your experience through calm leadership rather than explanation? How can you let your maturity show through restraint instead of justification? Because the moment you stop fighting time and start standing comfortably within it, age stops being something you defend and becomes something that quietly works in your favor. One of the most subtle yet destructive mistakes older men make with younger women is becoming emotionally heavy too soon. It often comes from good intentions, sincerity, depth, a desire for real connection. But timing turns those strengths into liabilities. Attraction doesn't die because of emotion itself, it dies because of emotional pressure. And younger women feel that pressure almost instantly. Emotional heaviness shows up when a man moves too quickly into seriousness, expectations, or future-oriented conversations before emotional trust has had time to develop. It's when curiosity is replaced with intensity, playfulness with weight, exploration with implication. The energy shifts from "we're discovering each other" to "this means something now," and that shift can feel suffocating rather than grounding. Psychologically, attraction needs room to breathe. In the early stages, desire grows through lightness, mystery, and emotional spaciousness. When a man rushes depth, he collapses that space. Instead of feeling pulled forward, she feels pushed. And no matter how interested she may be, pressure activates resistance. Even genuine attraction retreats when it feels cornered. This is especially important in age gap dynamics. Younger women are often more sensitive to emotional pacing because they were still forming their identity, boundaries, and emotional rhythms. When an older man brings heavy emotional gravity too early, it can feel like he's asking her to step into a role she hasn't chosen yet. Not a partner, but a stabilizer, a validator, or an anchor for his emotional world. That's not romance, that's responsibility, and responsibility kills desire. Many men mistake emotional intensity for emotional depth. They're not the same. Depth is calm, it's steady, it unfolds over time. Intensity is urgent, it seeks reassurance, it wants clarity before connection has had a chance to form. Younger women don't pull away because they don't want depth. They pull away because depth offered too soon feels like a demand rather than an invitation. There's also a philosophical element here. Desire lives in the present moment. Emotional heaviness drags the interaction into the future. Commitment, meaning, outcomes. When the present is no longer enough, attraction weakens. A woman wants to feel that you're grounded not anxiously leaning into what this could become. Presence is seductive, projection is not. Another overlooked aspect is emotional polarity. Masculine energy, when balanced, provides structure without pressure. It creates safety without control. When a man becomes emotionally heavy too soon, polarity collapses. He shifts from grounded presence into emotional neediness, not always obvious but felt. Younger women may not label it as such, but they experience it as something being asked of them emotionally that they didn't offer. The men who maintain attraction understand restraint. They don't suppress emotion, they pace it. They allow connection to grow naturally, layer by layer. They don't rush vulnerability to prove sincerity. They let consistency do the work, and consistency builds trust far more effectively than emotional disclosure ever could in the early stages. This restraint communicates confidence. It says, I don't need this to move faster than it is. That signal is powerful. It allows a woman to lean in at her own pace, to choose depth rather than feel obligated to meet it, and choice is where desire lives. So the real discipline isn't being emotionally open, it's knowing when. Can you stay relaxed while attraction develops? Can you enjoy the unfolding without trying to secure it? Can you trust that connection doesn't need to be rushed to be real? Because the moment you replace emotional pressure with emotional patience, attraction stops retreating and starts moving toward you on its own. Another habit that quietly destroys attraction is when older men slip into the role of teacher instead of staying grounded as a man. It often happens unconsciously. Experience turns into explanation. Wisdom turns into lectures, and before long, conversation stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like correction. Younger women don't pull away because they dislike intelligence or insight. They pull away because no one feels attracted while being talked down to. Understanding is attractive. Explaining is neutral. Lecturing is repelling. Here's the psychological truth. Attraction requires equality of presence, not equality of experience. When a man constantly explains life, relationships, or how things really work, he positions himself above the interaction. Even if his points are correct, the emotional message is wrong. It says, I'm here to inform you, rather than I'm here to experience you. Desire doesn't grow in classrooms. It grows in moments of shared attention. Younger women are especially sensitive to this dynamic. They are already navigating a world where they're often underestimated or overinstructed. When an older man repeats that pattern, he blends into the background of authority figures rather than standing out as a romantic presence. Attraction fades not because he lacks value, but because his value is being presented in the least seductive way possible. There's also a subtle power imbalance created by lecturing. When one person is always explaining and the other is always listening, polarity collapses. She becomes a student, he becomes a guide, and while guidance can be useful, it's rarely erotic. Romance thrives on curiosity, tension, and discovery, not on conclusions delivered too early. Many men confuse being interesting with being informative. But attraction doesn't come from how much you know. It comes from how you make someone feel in your presence. Do you listen deeply? Do you ask questions that show awareness rather than superiority? Do you respond to her emotions instead of correcting her logic? These are the behaviors that build emotional connection. Philosophically, wisdom carries its own silence. A man who truly understands life doesn't need to announce it. His calm, restraint, and perspective show up naturally in how he responds, how he handles conflict, how he remains steady when emotions rise. Younger women don't need to be told that your experience they can feel it if it's real. Another overlooked aspect is this: lecturing kills mystery. When you explain everything, there's nothing left to discover. Attraction feeds on what's not fully revealed. When a man leaves space in conversation, when he lets her thoughts land without immediately reframing them, curiosity deepens. She leans in. She wants to know more, not because you told her, but because you allowed her to feel understood. The most attractive older men don't rush to give advice. They observe. They listen. They speak less, but with precision. When they do offer insight, it feels earned, not imposed. And because it's rare, it carries weight. This doesn't mean you should suppress your intelligence or experience. It means you should express it through presence, not performance, through patience, not preaching, through understanding, not instruction. So the question becomes simple but uncomfortable. When you speak, are you trying to connect or to be right? Are you responding to her or to an idea you want to deliver? Because the moment you stop lecturing and start understanding, attraction shifts. She no longer feels managed or measured. She feels seen. And being seen, without being corrected, is one of the most powerful forces of attraction there is. Another attraction killer that shows up quietly but powerfully is when an older man begins chasing validation instead of leading calmly. This shift often happens beneath awareness. It doesn't look like desperation on the surface. It looks like over-checking, over-accommodating, over-investing, and younger women feel it immediately. Attraction is rooted in polarity. Polarity requires direction. When a man starts seeking reassurance, asking indirectly if she's interested, adjusting himself to keep her pleased, or monitoring her reactions too closely, he gives away leadership. The interaction becomes reactive instead of grounded. And the moment a woman senses that she is being emotionally followed rather than confidently met, attraction weakens. Psychologically, validation-seeking places the woman in the position of emotional authority. She becomes the one who approves, reassures, and stabilizes the connection. That may sound subtle, but it changes everything. Desire doesn't grow when a woman feels responsible for maintaining a man's emotional state. It grows when she feels she can relax into his presence without managing it. Many older men fall into this pattern because they're trying to be considerate. They don't want to push, they don't want to lose her, so they soften too much. They prioritize being liked over being grounded. But attraction isn't built on approval, it's built on respect. And respect comes from consistency, boundaries, and emotional self-sufficiency. There's a philosophical distinction here that matters deeply. Leading calmly does not mean controlling. It means being internally settled. It means you don't need constant signals to know where you stand. You allow silence without anxiety. You allow space without panic. You don't rush to fill emotional gaps with reassurance-seeking behavior. That steadiness is deeply attractive, especially to younger women who are often surrounded by emotional volatility. When a man chases validation, his energy contracts. He becomes cautious, eager, slightly tense. His humor changes, his voice changes. His decisions become filtered through fear of loss. Younger women may not consciously identify this shift, but they feel it as pressure. And pressure, even when subtle, erodes attraction. Leading calmly, on the other hand, creates safety. It communicates, I'm comfortable whether you lean in or pull back. That doesn't push a woman away, it gives her room to choose. And choice is the foundation of desire. When a woman senses that you are not emotionally dependent on her reactions, curiosity replaces resistance. This is especially critical in age gap dynamics. Younger women are often assessing whether an older man is emotionally stable or quietly needy. Stability isn't proven through words, it's demonstrated through behavior. Can you stay consistent without chasing? Can you remain warm without over-investing? Can you hold interest without clinging to outcomes? The most attractive men don't ask for reassurance, they offer presence. They don't fish for validation. They create an emotional environment that feels steady and inviting. And because they aren't seeking approval, approval often comes naturally. So instead of asking yourself how to get her to want you, ask yourself something harder. Can you want without needing? Can you stay interested without becoming attached to a response? Can you remain centered even when the outcome is uncertain? Because the moment you stop chasing validation and start standing in calm leadership, attraction shifts direction. She no longer feels followed. She feels drawn. And being drawn is far more powerful than being persuaded. The final habit that quietly destroys attraction is when an older man stops evolving and starts defending who he used to be. This is subtle, and that's why it's so dangerous. It shows up as rigidity, nostalgia, and an unconscious belief that age alone should earn respect or desire. Younger women don't reject age, they reject stagnation. Psychologically, attraction is tied to growth energy. Human beings are wired to move toward what feels alive, expanding, and self-renewing. When a man talks more about the past than the future, when his identity is anchored in former success, former relevance, former confidence, something essential collapses. He may still have resources, experience, and intelligence, but his energy feels closed instead of open. Younger women are not looking for a museum of who you were. They're looking for evidence of who you are becoming. This is where many older men misunderstand the power of maturity. True maturity isn't certainty, it's curiosity. It isn't rigid opinions, it's adaptive intelligence. When a man stops learning, emotionally, socially, culturally, he begins to project an invisible arrogance. Not loud arrogance, but the kind that says, I already know. And nothing kills attraction faster than the sense that there's nothing left to discover. Philosophically, desire requires tension. Tension comes from contrast, unpredictability, and forward motion. A man who believes he has already arrived creates emotional flatness. A man who is still refining himself creates intrigue. Younger women feel this immediately. They sense whether your identity is fixed or fluid, and fluidity feels alive. This habit often hides behind phrases like, "I'm too old for that," or "I've already been through this." While those statements may be factually true, emotionally they signal withdrawal from life. They suggest that growth is finished, that curiosity has expired. Younger women don't hear wisdom in that. They hear resignation, and resignation is unattractive at any age. Another layer of this issue is emotional evolution. Many older men intellectually mature but emotionally freeze. They become efficient, controlled, and composed, but also distant. They stop exploring vulnerability, playfulness, and emotional range. Younger women, who often live in a more expressive emotional world, feel this gap as disconnection, not because the man lacks control, but because he lacks emotional movement. Attraction doesn't require emotional chaos, but it does require emotional presence. Presence means you are responsive, engaged, and alive in the moment. Not operating on autopilot, not protected by cynicism, not hiding behind experience. The most compelling older men are not those who remind younger women how much they know. They are the ones who remain students of life. They listen without dismissing. They adapt without losing their core. They grow without needing to prove anything. Their confidence comes not from certainty, but from self-trust. When a woman feels that being with you means expansion, new perspectives, deeper conversations, emotional depth, attraction becomes natural. But when she feels that being with you means shrinking into your past, she instinctively pulls away. This is not about chasing youth. It's about honoring vitality. It's about choosing growth over comfort, curiosity over ego, evolution over defense. Age becomes attractive when it carries momentum, not when it clings to history. So the question is not whether you're older. The question is whether you are still moving. Because the man who keeps evolving doesn't compete with younger men, he transcends them. And the moment you commit to becoming instead of preserving, attraction stops being something you seek and becomes something you naturally generate.